So, hello everyone. My name is Janisha Parchment, and I am an instructional designer with the Center for Online and Continuing Education. I've been with the department for almost 2 years at this point, and like Judy said, it's a family, and I love the work that we do and the awesome faculty members that we're able to interact with. So, with that, I will let Nancy introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I am Nancy Shehadeh. I'm an adjunct faculty in the College of Business, and I'm also the online program coordinator for the College of Business. And I'm really excited about the conversation we're going to have today about feedback. Yeah, that's pretty much me.
And we have Ricky. We cannot forget
Yes.
about Ricky. Tell us about yourself, Ricky.
Well, I am in the College of Social Work and Criminal Justice, and I work specifically within the College of the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice. I just love these professional development sessions. I think they're good. I'm glad that I'm able to be here. I hadn't been in one in a while, but they are so productive. And I can't thank you enough for inviting me, Nancy. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for taking the time to join.
Yes, and thank you to everyone who has also taken some time out of their very busy end of semester day to join us today. So let's jump right into it. Our topic for today is nurturing student growth through feedback. So, as we were building this presentation, one of the things we were talking about is having you think about what is your why. So, I'm going to give you maybe 30 seconds thinking time to think about and write down a few of the reasons why you provide feedback. 30 seconds of silence. I know sometimes that can be a little challenging, but take 30 seconds to just reflect on what is your why and why you provide feedback. I love these 30 seconds to think and then seeing the comments being put in the chat. Does anyone want their mic unmuted so they can share a little bit about their why? Nancy, Ricky, Judy?
Well, my why is really inspiring and motivating students. Um, and, just keeping that in mind as I provide feedback, focusing on that positive language. And yeah, that's really, I feel like what my why is. And I try to keep that in mind, what's my, yeah, and what, of course, what the intent of the assignment was, keeping that in mind, and making sure the feedback that I provide is valuable and useful to them.
I'm Jerry Durbich, College of Business Communication. I just wanted to add to piggyback on what was just said. I think perhaps one of the most important reasoning or requirement for providing feedback is your ability to acknowledge areas for improvement or to acknowledge that a work has been done excellently. The grade is important for a student as well. And so that feedback identifies that, well, look, you have earned an A or you have earned a C. If you have earned an A, the feedback is not as much. If you have earned a C, then my feedback would identify reasoning for that C grade. I'm justifying the grade areas for improvement. And overall, it is the courtesy that is expected of all teachers to provide the feedback so students would understand that their work has been acknowledged. Those are my 2 cents.
That's beautiful, Jerry. Thank you. Thank you.
I will absolutely agree with Nancy in the sense that I was very fortunate to be mentored by a professor who always provided feedback with the main purpose of motivating, because he would always give very positive feedback at the beginning and then give me a huge list of corrections and revisions. But that motivation would give me the fuel to attack the long list, to-do list afterwards. So I absolutely agree with Nancy about motivation. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that. A long list, a long to-do list, but you jumped right into it. That's beautiful.
And we have one more. Frank de Latour wants to speak.
Wow, it's tough being a lawyer and not being able to talk, man. I was jonesing over here. Thank you for unmuting me. I've started doing this semester. I used to only congratulate the students that did well. That's kind of easy. And I agree with Jerry. It's more important to communicate with the students that did not do so well. My first objective is to tell them not to be discouraged, that they have plenty of assessments to improve. I then suggest to them things that they can do to improve. I invite them to join me in a meeting and discuss how they studied and prepared for the assessment that they didn't do well on. Another thing that I started doing this semester is I started taking attendance in my classes because I saw that I didn't have that great of attendance. I had two 8 a.m. classes, and maybe that had to do something with it, or maybe it was my poor delivery. I don't know. But I started taking attendance um, and and saying to them if I saw they missed a couple classes, I say, "Hey, I'm concerned about you. What's going on? Are you sick? Is there anything I can do to help you?" This was really good. They immediately got back to me, told me the reason for their non-attendance. I like that, and I think I'm going to continue that in the future. But thank you so much for unmuting me. I was dying to talk.
Thank you, Frank. That is a great point. Taking the time to reach out to the students that aren't attending, just providing that individualized attention. Students appreciate that.
And we have one more hand up for Terry Clark. I'll go ahead and unmute.
Is probably a little bit different. I'm the clinic director at Communication Sciences and Disorders, and I supervise a lot of sessions. We give feedback after each session, very specific. And it's so interesting that I find that they respond so much better to all the positive, very specific positive feedback. That's where I really see the growth in my students. But of course, the negative is there as well, to speak a little bit differently or whatever it is that we can improve on, and ask them also, let's get together with a brainstorming section and a session. Let's think about this together, and we'll plan how to make improvements in the next sessions. So anyway, it's a little bit different perspective, but that's my point of view on what I'm doing.
Thank you, Terry. And what a powerful perspective that is. Thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you to all who have unmuted themselves and were willing to share and even typed into the chat. We all have different reasons for our why, and we've all kind of seen different effects of our why. And I think it's important to acknowledge those before we jump into kind of the meat and potatoes of our presentation today. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions in the chat if you have any. If there's something that you would like to jump in there and talk to us about, please raise your hand. We want this to be interactive. We want to hear what you have to say because it's a learning community. We want to learn from each other. So a quick quote for us to get us started. Feedback, like rain, should be gentle enough to nourish a man's growth without destroying his roots. So, what are some forms of feedback that you use in your classes? So, there's a couple of ways that you can participate in this. You can scan with your phone the QR code on the screen, or you can go to slido.com and enter code 039191. We'll see responses as they populate.
Oh, these are great Google Forms written verbal Padlet.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about how Miro is used to give feedback.
Yes, I'm intrigued by that one too.
So it looks like a lot of us use written means to give feedback. Got Padlet, verbal, video, Canvas comments, personal meetings on the rubric. All right. So keep those ideas in mind as we continue through the presentation. So for our session today, here are our goals. We've got 4 kind of overarching topics that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the what and why of feedback, how to provide feedback. Then we're going to get into our discussion about current practices and best practices. And then we'll talk a little bit about the tools we can use to give feedback. So the what is feedback? And I think there were a lot of great examples provided when we opened up the discussion about why do you provide feedback? So we give the students feedback to give them information about their performance, right? I like to think of it as a way to bridge the gap between what the expectation was when students were given that assignment and then the work produced. What is it that they showed us that they did? And then we help them bridge the gap of how they can improve and what they did right. So the why and the how of giving feedback. I thought this picture of the report card on a Pop-Tart was so cute, but yet so relevant to what we were talking about. When we give students feedback, right, we need to explain how the criteria is met or it's not met. So, for example, with this B in math, why is it just a B? Why is it not an A? What is the difference between the A and the B? And giving students that information to let them know that it's more than just a grade, right? There's many ways for them to learn and to grow based on whatever content that they are learning. I'd like to remind instructors to avoid picking things apart, focus on areas for growth. So, for example, if you have an assignment that's talking specifically about, it's a writing assignment, and it's an English class, so it's a writing assignment. In those kind of classes, it's super important to pick apart the writing mechanisms, right? To make sure that they structured a sentence properly, to make sure that there's punctuation marks. But in a course that's, for example, maybe about criminal justice, that might not be such a high priority of what it is that you want to provide students feedback on. So always remember that feedback is very powerful, right? What we talked about in the beginning is we don't want to do anything that's going to demean our students, but we do want to give them that constructive criticism to help them be better at everything that they're doing. And last but not least, one size does not fit all as it relates to feedback. What might work in one course, in one discipline works, and it might not work in another, and that's okay. And that's why we are here to have this conversation where we can learn from each other to see if there are other things that work in your class that might not work in another class. All right. So now we're going to start our conversation. And so what I've kind of done is primed a couple of questions and we'll see where the conversation goes. So our first question, how do you provide feedback in smaller classes versus larger classes? So our panelists can answer, and then if there's anyone who's an attendee who would also like to participate, please raise your hand and we can unmute you. So Nancy, do you want to start us off for this one?
Sure. So I do provide feedback a little differently between when I'm providing feedback for my smaller classes in comparison to the larger classes. And when I say smaller, I'm thinking 45 students or so or less. And then when I'm looking at my larger classes, I'm thinking of about 100 or less. I honestly have never taught a class more than 120. So I'm very interested in anyone who has taught classes larger than that and how they go about doing it. For my larger classes, I'm big on grading rubrics. I have my go-to Word document with ready messages, which I tweak depending on the student's work. And I have to say for the larger classes, I also make notes as I'm grading of areas that everybody seems to excel in, and then areas that I feel like, they could improve on. And a lot of my assignments in my class they kind of build on each other. So I'll always notice that my first few assignments, I provide a lot of feedback in order for them to be able to improve on the assignments later on in the course. And then with the notes I take for those larger classes, I'll create, a written announcement, maybe a little mini lesson talking about the common challenges, and then talking about the areas that, they really excelled in. The smaller classes, I do provide a lot more individualized feedback, voice messages, video feedback. My grading rubrics are there as well, always. It just makes grading so much easier, and my students are able to access those rubrics before they submit the assignment to make sure, to see what criteria, what my expectations are. And those are the things that kind of come to mind. Ricky, what do you have to add in there, and Judy?
Well, I don't differentiate between small and large. I just, in my mind, I had to get over that part of it, because I thought, well, and like you, 45 to 73. Frank's the only one I know in our college that has actually taught classes in our school that exceed 100. But I use a lot of video technology in there, and I actually got this from Nancy. You have the ability to have a grading rubric. You'll notice an icon down there that has the ability to do a video if you want to talk to them and they can actually see you. If I have individuals and I can take a look at my analytics and tell who's struggling and who's not, I might use a video, a short one. Keep it short. Keep it positive, but explain to them how they can get to the next level and improve on their writing skills. And a lot of the feedback, Nancy, I'll be honest with you, I'll just tell students, look, I need you to get over to the writing lab, and we need to begin the process now, and I'm going to work with you, but those are professionals over there and they can help you. You would be amazed at how many students, they just flourish after one or two visits over there. All of a sudden they just change. But feedback is something that the word powerful keeps coming out. And I don't think as instructors, we can never do too much of it. They depend on us to tell them, listen, here's where you can improve. And if you don't, then the answer is always the same. But I do Nancy, it's amazing. But when you were talking, I'm going, yeah, those are just great points. But I've also had you as a mentor, and I've had Judy as a mentor. And we have someone on here with us, Frank Delatorre, who is probably one of the best I've seen. He'll even reach out to people. He and I joke about it and ask them how they're doing because he's concerned. That is a genuine way to approach a student who you see is struggling, to help them out. But everything I'm hearing is just really positive.
Thank you, Ricky. I love the sharing the resources and videos. I just find them so impactful, and I'll notice my students enjoy them as well. And reaching out to students, just, especially those that are struggling, it's so important.
So yeah, I am very similar to Nancy in how I approach things, and I do differentiate between large and small classes, because my large classes at minimum are 180, and recently I did 400. So it's sort of a lot. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the biggest issue that I have is trying to figure out how to answer email and not spend my whole life answering email. So I agree in that finding a way to give generalized feedback around the assignment, like if you did it this way, then this is something that you might want to look at. And if you have a question, shoot me an email. So by giving them the video rundown of way things should go, and providing them, in addition to that, the opportunity to speak with me and get feedback from me, I find minimizes getting 1,000 emails. And at the same time, people who are anxious or are having trouble do get in touch with me. And it's a lot of work, but it's worth it. And so I have to take the kind of the generalized, like sift to the point where the people who get in touch with me are the ones that really do and want and need to get in touch with me. With the small classroom, it's a lot more of a multi-channel kind of approach. So if you have rubrics, in addition to the rubrics, for example, if we go through an exercise, then I'll spend 10 or 15 minutes after the exercise describing feedback about what we just did, asking their opinions on things. And so the whole class can kind of jump in and help each other in that way. And individually, I also provide written feedback to them if they've submitted something online using Canvas comments, and then they can get in touch with me individually if they have a question about that particular comment. But because it's so much smaller, it's so much easier to speak to somebody directly and approach them if something's going on. So there really is a different balance for me because of the size of the classrooms.
We have a few more hands raised. I'm sorry to jump in.
I think
That's
David.
fine. I'm
Yeah.
just going to say I'm in awe of that. So I don't even have anything to add to this. From my class sizes are all smaller than what anybody else has acknowledged as small. But thank you for that. What a great perspective.
Really great.
Thank you for unmuting me. Yeah, wow, 180, 200 students. Wow. I think I need to go therapy. But the first thing when I started teaching online, first thing I did is sat down with somebody who's forgotten more about online teaching than I know, and that's Ricky Langlois. And I also took a class with Judy Summers on how to teach online. I can't imagine doing so without doing that class. And one thing I learned from both of these incredible instructors is before I give out any negative or critique about a student, I lead off with a positive. And sometimes it's hard to find, but I'm a lawyer and I can be innovative. So before I say anything that they did poorly, I try to pick out something they did positively. I call that positive coaching. I actually did that when I coached my son in Little League. Before I corrected one of these 12-year-olds, I found out something they did right. You tied your shoe on correctly, but next time, open up your glove. But I think that's important. Another thing that I've always done, even in my law practice as a public defender, I give out my cell number. My wife didn't like that I was giving our cell numbers out to burglars, murderers, alleged, and alleged robbers. But I took out all that I can't get in contact with my lawyer, or now as an adjunct professor, I can't get in contact with my professor. He doesn't have an office. So they have my cell number. And some of my colleagues think I'm crazy, but I'm here to tell you 39 years as a lawyer and 26 years as an instructor. I've never had a client or a student abuse that. I find that most of them prefer, like my own family, prefer not to talk to me. They prefer communicating with me by text, and so that's fine. Rubrics, oh my God, that makes our life so much easier. Thank you, Judy Summers, for teaching me how to do a rubric. They've made my life a lot easier. And I think, like Ricky, all our classes I thought were big until I heard some of you. Our classes are usually about 70. And with that, I have no excuse not to communicate with them. So that's how I use, how I provide feedback to my students. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak.
I just wanted to mention too that sometimes, I have small classes of 25 at an average. And before I talk a little bit about my practices, sometimes it's not providing feedback on a graded assignment. So what I start out normally in a classroom, especially if it's a big assignment, that have students, groups of 3, sit and say, well, look, what is it that you understand about this assignment after I have explained it? Maybe there's something else you do not or you see differently. And one person from each group would have to ask a question for some kind of clarification. And that is based on the idea that students learn more through peer intervention. Another thing that I have them do, and this is often on a graded assignment or an assignment that is to be graded, I have the peer review process. If you're in class, you pair yourself with another student. I give them a rubric, but this is what you should be expecting from this assignment, and they do that. Of course, if it's online, then I would pair you. So the peer review is a good thing in providing feedback as well. I also have what I call touch-based meetings. You must meet with me twice a semester, and these are graded meetings. And we will talk with each other, we will go over your assignments, your grade, and I give you additional feedback. Something that I find that is extremely powerful is I share students' work in class with their permission and say, well, look, this is what we are looking for. If you can meet these standards, then I think you would do well. So those are some of the kinds of feedback that I provide. Yeah, well, my 2 cents there again. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. that was great. And I can't agree with you more. Peer reviews are wonderful to use in the classroom. I know I use them on mine, and hopefully we'll hear more about them.
Appreciated the comments from Ricky and David about GTAs. I also would drown without my TAs because I have 2 classes that are typically 100 and then 2 other classes that are 50 each. But I think it's important, and what I personally do is I always meet with my TAs before the semester starts, and I actually tell them what my expectations are regarding feedback. The first semester I had a TA, I went and checked some assignments, and I would see things like great job and just very generic, meaningless feedback. So I actually sit down with my TAs and let them know what my expectations are, and I actually give them access to previous courses so that they can see the kind of feedback that I expect from them.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing and sharing all your knowledge and your experience. It's definitely helpful. Let's go to question number 2. What are some innovative ways you have provided feedback? Anyone can take that one first.
We could just jump in. Well, innovative ways. So as I noted, videos. I do a lot of video feedback, voice messages. I've actually used the Canvas media function they have in SpeedGrader, but I have to say I've had a few times where I'll use it for maybe 6 to 8 students, and then I'll get a little glitchy, and I can't scroll through their assignment as I'm creating that video. So I find myself using other tools like Vocaroo or Loom for video presentation, for video feedback. And I do written feedback as well. I've used, what else? Padlet I've used before for feedback. I think those are, but my primary ways are probably written, voice messages, and video. So any other interesting or innovative ways you provide feedback, Ricky, Judy, anybody else out there?
So you had mentioned earlier wanting to know about Miro. So I use that as a way to help students understand and to better understand how students kind of mind map their progress, as well as how they went about the assignment in general, depending on what it is. And so I am a research coordinator here at FAU High School and a faculty for the College of Education. But one of the things I really like helping students explore is their own understanding of their perspectives. So I use Miro as a tool to help them break down really complex ideas. And then from there, you can really get to see like what's missing, as well as adding in their resources. So a lot of you talked about like getting them to the right resource or to make sure that they're understanding the assignment in general. So I can kind of go into Miro as they mind map their idea of how they're going to outline it and I can add in all those other areas. And then the same thing on the back end is saying, like, this was a really strong section. You did a great job here. We're lacking in this area. And I think the reason why is if you look at your mind map, here's, we get less and less context as we go down. So it really helps them reframe their ideas and get excited about having a better understanding because they can see it visually. And I think they really enjoy seeing what's all that craziness going on in their heads on paper. So I really enjoy that part.
And another thing that I was thinking about as you were sharing that, Catherine, is the reflection piece to that, right? So not only are they pulling all of that knowledge from their brain, but then they can go back and reflect on, this is how I got to this point. Maybe there's a different path that I could have taken, or this is how I can improve for the next time. So that's good. Thank you for sharing that. Linnell, did we have one more?
Yep, absolutely. David Hirsch. I'm going to go ahead and unmute. Oh, unmute. There you go.
All
yes,
right.
Go ahead.
So so I know we're talking about medium in order to the channel through which we're providing feedback, but one of the biggest ways that I provide feedback is through humor, and it just taking a different tactic from it. So even though I have rubrics all over the place, and I can just check boxes and things like that, and then have their kind of self-explanation for certain things that have to be in an assignment. Sometimes they'll say something very funny or very off, and it's really some self-deprecating humor on my part goes a long way to them paying attention to what I say. So for me, it's not just getting the message to them, but it's also getting them to read the message or hear the message. And part of that is the medium. And then part of that is just me kind of jumping around a little bit like a clown sometimes. And that's it.
I love it. Thank you, David.
I love it too. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, David. What a great, oh yeah, edutainment. Thank you, Beth. These are all such wonderful thoughts and ideas.
It really is. And I love what he mentioned, we want to make sure that they read it, view it, actually take the time to review the feedback that's provided. And that's a great way to do it, through humor.
Agreed. Awesome. So next question. Are there any efficient or quick ways that you would recommend to give feedback?
Well, I could jump back in here, but it's kind of what I mentioned before. For me, voice messages. So when I'm going through grading, and especially when the class is a little larger, it's so much quicker. And I'm able to share a lot of feedback on the assignment. So I find it, the grading rubrics, but additional feedback, I am big on voice messages, and of course videos, depending on if I need to really make them aware of specific areas that they did well in or areas that they could improve on. But when it comes to efficiency, I have to say the voice messages, I'm able to get a lot more graded, like provide that feedback, especially if I want to be very specific in what I'm sharing with them.
And I'm going to jump in and do a support for what Catherine said earlier, because in my mind, and I've done a lot with this, there is the best way to really see what their thought process is through a concept map or a mind map, because you can see the strengths, but you can also see the weaknesses and see where they've lost something. That said, quick and efficient may not be it, but I don't have to deal with the 200 people either. So
There was one thing that I wanted you to mention, Nancy. We talked a little bit about having those pre-made messages. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Very helpful. My go-to feedback document. So I, especially for my core classes, I have them specific for specific assignments that I save from semester to semester. And then I have my regular kind of file document that I have, but those messages are already written. I tweak them and I use them a lot for my larger classes, 50 students and above. That's my go-to. Because just like I think it was David that noted it, the grading rubrics are great, but students like to hear from us. It contributes to that teacher presence in the classroom and especially online. So, I always make sure to include their name in there, try to tweak it for their specific assignment, but it's very helpful. So I don't know if a lot of people use that. Ricky, if you use it, but I find that it definitely helps with the efficiency factor.
Nancy, with those core courses like I have and you have, I guess I would probably be spending so much more time had I not done exactly what you're doing. And then I can just dance around it. My feedback is continuous from day one throughout the entire semester. I use a lot of technologies, but it's important that they know I'm there. The reason I use the video so much, just short, I'm talking 1 to 2 minutes. I want them to see my face so that they can read the concern on my face and they can sort of judge by what I'm telling them. This is what I need for you to do to improve. And it's the same thing. A while ago, someone mentioned peer-to-peer feedback. God, that's powerful stuff. But we also have to provide feedback on how they do their peer-to-peer reviews. So we got to lay down that foundation for them, because telling them they did a great job or that you totally agree with what they just said in their discussion, or I do it with essays as well. I want them to peer review each other, and that's tough because it exposes them to some things that they haven't been exposed to. Here I am peer reviewing another student, so it's just important. I think the quick and efficient way, though, is what you suggested, Nancy, and that has helped me tremendously.
I thank you for unmuting me. So, yeah, as far as quick and efficient, that's tough, particularly with the really large classes. The small ones, I can always walk up to somebody and say a word to them or pull them aside. The part of them, I feel like the management of feedback it's more than just providing the feedback, as we started venturing into. For example, I get a lot of questions about an assignment, like where I have to ask them to post a news article and do a summary of it, and there's all kinds of rules about what a news article is. So it's really strange. Like, so an opinion or a tweet is not a news article, but if somebody says the stock dropped, is that a news article? Because it is kind of news. And I even asked reporters a question, just total tangent, what is news? And they said anything that's not about me. So, which I thought was interesting. Anyway, so I get these links to these articles saying, is this appropriate? And I email them back and I say, well, tell me the reasons why you think it's appropriate. So a lot of feedback to me is just getting them to go and double check the directions. And so when they come to me with a question, I'll say, well, what is it according to what the assignment's required? And I have them tick off the things that I spent all that time writing down to begin with or putting in a video to begin with. And that seems to really focus them. So a really quick and efficient way is to simply have them do it and then have me check it if they want me to check something. So that way I'm not doing the work for them, and at the same time they understand it better because they did it.
That's awesome. Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. That was really good.
So we are nearing 1 o'clock, which is super surprising to me because time flies when you're having fun. So let's go really quickly to here are a couple of tools which everyone has kind of mentioned throughout this presentation, right? Using the rubrics that you find in Canvas, peer reviews, which we've also talked about, which is you can use those in Canvas as well, a tool. Providing feedback through quizzes, right? So as you create those quizzes, there's options beneath the right and the wrong or generalize. You can provide feedback to students through those quizzes as well. And then just using the speed grader annotations in Canvas, which we all do. I'm going to skip a few key points. You will see those. It's just the highlights of some of the things that we've talked about. And you will be able to see that in the presentation that I will send out. And then a couple of best practices, which a lot of you have already talked about, right? The quality over the quantity of your feedback, right? So making sure that it is substantial and actually reflects on what it is that you would like students to focus on in terms of their work. Remember, it's more than just a grade. And then the idea of revisions and reflections, right? So just giving students feedback and not having a way for them to reflect on that feedback you've provided, or even giving them an opportunity to make some revisions is super helpful as we talk about feedback. So those couple of things will lead to us nurturing student growth through our feedback. And we are really at time, and I would have loved to ask you all this question, but kind of as a parting thought, do you ever request feedback from your students? And if you do, how do you make that inform your current practice? So remember that the student work and student and teacher feedback can definitely help you improve your teaching practices. And so, therefore, I leave you all with that thought. If you have any questions, my email will be there for you. Thank you all for your time, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
I will second or third that. What a delightful session this has been. Thanks to all of you for being willing to step in and share with us. That's what makes it such a valuable and powerful experience.